אשר כהנים לעבודת המולבים ושירם וזמרם והשם כהנים לעבודת המולבים ושירם וזמרם ושם ושם נעלה ונראה ושם ושם נעלה ונראה ושם ושם נעלה ונראה ושם ושם נעלה ונראה.
Hello everyone, this is the 6th and final episode about Korbanot. And as one of our avid listeners told me, Rabbi, there's nothing left to sacrifice. So indeed, there's just one segment left. And that is, what is the halacha? At the end of the day, if you have the time, you'll say the Korbanot. If you have more time, you'll learn them so that you'll get a double fulfillment. Both you'll recite them in place of sacrificing, and you'll understand what you're saying, so you'll get the fulfillment of learning them, not to mention dividing your learning into thirds. But if you're pressed for time, you come to shul late. We all know you have to curtail your Pesukei de Zimra. What do you do with Korbanot, if at all? Here we find an interesting machloket. Going back again to the basic question, is it like learning Torah or is it a recitation in place of the Korbanot? Comes along the Shulchan Aruch, right at the beginning of his magnum opus, the Code of Jewish Law, and says, Tov Lomar, it's good to say all these various Korbanot. However, the Ramah in Siman Memchet does two unique things. Number one, usually the Ramah, as we like to say, put the mapa ala shulchan. The Shulchan Aruch, the table, was written by Rav Yosef Karo, and the Ramah put the tablecloth on the table. So first you had the table, and then the Ramah wrote glosses on it. This is one of the rare examples where he actually talks about it before the Shulchan Aruch opens his mouth. He writes an introduction, and in this introduction he does another thing, and that is he makes a distinction between Parshat HaTamid and the rest, and says the Ramah, V'omrim Parshat HaTamid. You say the Parshat HaTamid, Vayidaber Hashem and Moshe Lemor, Savet B'nei Yisrael V'amarta Lehem et Korbani Lachmi L'Yishai, the famous laning from Rosh Chodesh. You say, no more, no less. He doesn't say Tov Lomar. He says you say. The Shulchan Aruch Harav is even more radical on this level. He says, and I quote, Nahagu kol Yisrael, it's a custom of all the Jewish people, v'kavu chova al atzman, likrot parshat HaTamid b'chol yom kodem hatfilah. They took it upon themselves as an obligation to read the Parshat HaTamid. So indeed, if recitation is in place of sacrificing, we can start making distinctions. It's very nice to talk about the kiyor, the fountain, and to talk about the Trumat HaDeshen, the ash they took off the Mizbeach every day. But at the end of the day, if we're pressed for time, the main sacrifice we're worried about is the Tamid, because on a slow day in the Beis HaMikdash, if there were no other sacrifices, then they would bring the Korban Tamid in the morning, and the Korban Tamid in the afternoon, thus the name Tamid, consistent every day. And that is the most critical to say. So if you're pressed for time, that's what you say. And thus the Ramah says, Ve'yesh omrim, say the Ramah Archa, V'ribona olamim, atatzivitanu. And then he goes on to say various things about the difference between Korban Tamid and the rest. So the bottom line is, if the recitation is in place of sacrificing, we can make distinctions between the various passages in the siddur. The Korban Tamid obviously would be paramount, above and beyond all the rest. However, this being the case, if we say it's Torah learning, either dividing up your learning into thirds, or an obligatory Torah learning every day in place of sacrificing, then you can't skip it. And indeed, Rav Ben Sion Abba Shaul, who was a great Sephardic Rav in Israel, died in the 20th of the 21st century. He was a bosom buddy and a chavrusa of Rav Ovadia Yosef. He writes in his Responsum or Litzion that you have to say every single word of the Korbanot, even at the price of curtailing your Pesukei de Zimra. And he brings 3 reasons for it. Number 1, it's in the siddur. Many siddurs have taken out piyutim, many siddurs have taken out yotzrot. No one took out Korbanot. If it's in the siddur, it's in there for a reason. Number 2, he ultimately says that you have to divide your learning into 3 every day. And you can't do that by skipping anything. And therefore, you have to say the Ezu Makoman, the Rabbi Yishmael Omer, because that's the only way you're going to divide your learning into 3. That's Mishnah, that's Gemara, and of course the psukim prior in the Korbanot are the Torah part. So ultimately, if you want to fulfill the fulfillment of dividing your learning into thirds, you can't skip anything. And the third reason, beyond it's in there, and you have to divide your learning into third, is that ultimately, even Talmidei Chachamim, according to him, what we spoke about a few segments ago, have to say it every day, which means it's an obligatory learning that you have to do every day. And therefore he comes to the conclusion, and I quote, Adif ledalek chelik mipsuke de zimra kedei lo umra. It's better to skip part of psuke de zimra in order to say every single word of the korbanot. So at the end of the day, this machloket, is it in place of Torah learning? Or is its recitation literally in place of sacrificing? Will come down to one question, if you're pressed for time. So hopefully we come on time to shul and we say all the korbanot and we get all the fulfillments in the world. But if we're pressed for time, then ultimately, if its recitation is in place of sacrificing, you can start skipping a bit and saying this is more important than that, and the Talmud would be more important than the rest. But if it's Torah learning, and especially if it's Torah learning in which you must divide your daily Torah learning into thirds, then obviously you can't skip any word, even at the price of curtailing and making your Psukei de Zimra shorter. With this, we conclude the segment on Korbanot, and I hope and pray, for one thing, that you learned how important Korbanot are. Our poskim dealt with it on so many angles, from why do we say it, to do you have to say it standing up, can you say it at night, can you skip it? I hope and pray that all of us will no longer look at it at the siddur and say, this is not for me. But hopefully, we'll at least consider saying it, or at least part of it. And hopefully, if we do that, we will also get the blessing that God blessed the Jewish people, that indeed, unishalma, farim, sfatenu, our lips should be in place of the animals, until such time that we'll be zocheh to actually bring the sacrifices again.